The Dark Knight Trilogy is my favorite trilogy of films. In fact, I miss the art of the trilogy, the three-chapter story with a beginning, middle, and end. Oftentimes, these days, even if a film is marginally financially profitable, that film is going to be getting 13 sequels and 12 spin-offs. And I know that I'm somewhat cheating, given that I'm putting 3 films in the number 9 spot. But I have a pretty valid reasoning behind this, and it applies to a lot of my favorite series of films. For example, there's a moment in The Dark Knight Rises, the 3rd chapter of this trilogy, where Bruce Wayne is in a particularly desperate and hopeless situation, and that packs an emotional punch for me. Now, part of the reason behind that emotional punch is the fact that I have endured Bruce Wayne's journey throughout the first 2 chapters. The Dark Knight Rises wouldn't be as impactful if that was the one and only chapter that we got of the Dark Knight story. And the Dark Knight trilogy simultaneously transcended and revolutionized the superhero genre. In the mid to late 2000s, back when, when it was 1 or 2 superhero films coming out a year, now it's more so 1 or 2 superhero films coming out a night. It felt like there were a number of superhero pictures that were trying to do what the Dark Knight trilogy did, in that it put this comic book character in a grounded, gritty world, and a realistic world as well. But I think a lot of these people that tried to do what Chris Nolan did with these Batman films, I think they were forgetting that the dark and brooding tone is simply inherent to the character of Batman. And the Dark Knight trilogy transcended the superhero genre. I hardly even consider it a comic book film. I look at it more as a crime action thriller that happens to star Batman. One of the things that I love most about this series is that each of the 3 chapters in this trilogy primarily features a theme that can be really summed up in a single word. Batman Begins is primarily about fear. Firstly, fear is an excellent theme to tackle with your first Batman film because the character of Batman is an embodiment of the thing he fears most, bats. And he has an incredibly badass line in Batman Begins where he says to Alfred, when he reveals the bat inspiration behind his suit, he states, "It's time my enemies shared my dread." Batman is embodying the thing he fears most, and he's using that as an advantage or as a strength against, the criminal underworld of Gotham. Not to mention, the fear theme is also prevalent in one of the film's villains, the Scarecrow, excellently played by Cillian Murphy, and the whole fear toxin plot as well. The Dark Knight primarily features the theme of chaos. We've got the greatest hero in the world, Batman, versus the most iconic villain of all time, the Joker, the perfect yin and yang. Batman's foundation is based in justice and order, whereas Joker is an agent of anarchy and chaos. While the 3rd film, The Dark Knight Rises, its primary one-word theme would be despair or hopelessness. We see our hero completely broken and at his lowest, essentially, and he has to regain the will and the strength to rise up and become the Batman one last time. Christopher Nolan is my favorite filmmaker of all time. He's the primary reason I believe that this trilogy is such an individual and consistent vision. The writing and direction in the film is impeccable. There are a number of philosophical debates going on between characters in the dialogue throughout the 3 films. These films are smart, they're really, really about something. They're really saying something. We deal with ideas of human nature and what it means to be a hero. And the thing that's so strong about each individual film focusing on a primary theme that can be summed up in a single word really helps to keep these films focused. These themes really provide a great narrative through line throughout the films. Hans Zimmer's score, James Newton Howard too, is excellent. The music is less so triumphant and cartoonish, and it's more so visceral, and it mirrors the action that we're seeing on screen. And the performances are really excellent. Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne and Batman does a great job. In particular, with The Dark Knight Rises, I just felt the most emotionally connected and empathetic toward the character of Bruce and Batman, more so than I had felt with any of the Batman pictures. There are also a number of excellent supporting players. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, Michael Caine as the wise Alfred Pennyworth. Gary Oldman is phenomenal. I love what they did with Commissioner Gordon, in that they kind of made him Batman's partner in a way. Though the two performances that to me are the most brilliant, the most memorable in this series of films, Heath Ledger's Joker and Tom Hardy's Bane. Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker is a true revelation. I think Heath Ledger transcended what anyone thought was possible when it comes to portraying this character on screen. I mean, when you're looking at the eyes of this guy, these are not the eyes of Heath Ledger. This guy is totally embodying this character, and it is so captivating and magnetic. I've heard in the past some people complain that the Joker is the only great part about The Dark Knight. False, in my opinion. Joker, given that he is the representation of the chaos theme, it only makes sense that he is the driving force when it comes to the narrative. He's a very, very prevalent cog in this machine, but he is by no means the only cog. The story that is being told in The Dark Knight, there are a number of characters that are prevalent to telling that story. Bruce Wayne and Batman, Joker, Harvey Dent, Two-Face, Jim Gordon, Rachel Dawes. Harvey Dent / Two-Face is a great part about The Dark Knight as well. And his story, his evolution, or de-evolution really, thanks to the Joker's plan, is just like the Joker's actions and Bruce Wayne, Batman's actions, in service of the story. And that's what makes Christopher Nolan such a brilliant storyteller. He's not throwing the iconic character of the Joker into this movie because he's the biggest villain of all time. It's because he and Heath Ledger had a brilliant, unique, revolutionary take on this character that they wanted to show to the world. As brilliant as Heath Ledger is, the writing for the Joker is really, really fantastic. Tom Hardy's Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. Everyone knew it wasn't going to be easy to top the Joker, so to speak, when it comes to cinematic villains in this trilogy, but Tom Hardy did a phenomenal job. Chris Nolan and Tom Hardy created such an interesting character that strayed quite a bit from his comic book counterpart, but I am by no means a purist in that sense, so I was always very excited to see what they had to bring to this character. Tom Hardy is phenomenal. He is such a powerful physical force. I love what they did with his voice and the mixing. It's so unique and intriguing. You're really kind of holding on to every word. The guy's got brilliant presence, and Tom Hardy's performance in The Dark Knight Rises really solidified and currently solidifies Tom Hardy as a favorite actor of mine. Essentially, the only things with which Tom Hardy had to evoke emotion in the film, his eyes. Everything else was covered up. So the fact that this guy could be so captivating on screen with just the use of his eyes is such a display of immense talent. In fact, that's always kind of my go-to in regards to analyzing an actor's performance. I want to look into their eyes like I do with Heath Ledger's Joker and Tom Hardy's Bane, and I don't want to see the actor themselves. I want to look in their eyes and know that I am looking at a character. And true embodiment and devotion to bringing a character to life is a really special talent. This trilogy of films is brilliant. The writing and direction is incredibly smart. Much of the action takes place in frame, and that really helps the film out in regards to making this place feel real and gritty and lived in. In these films, Chris Nolan utilizes CG sparingly and effectively and seamlessly. The performances are brilliant across the board. The score, particularly what Hans Zimmer does with The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, is fantastic and intense and visceral and totally fitting to what we're seeing on screen. The real world setting just works wonders for this character and this particular vision of this character.